Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am?
Good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible? Shall I start the class now?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Please respond.
Ma'am, you're
Yes, ma'am,
audible.
you're audible.
No, you're audible.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, can you hear us?
Okay, so I'll start the class. Okay. Am I audible? Shall I start the class? Please respond.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. We can hear you.
Hello. Can you please? One of you should respond.
Ma'am, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, okay. I am not receiving audio. 1 minute, please. 1 minute. Just hold on. Am I audible? Please answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Now yes, I'm able to hear. 1 minute. I'll just put the video now. Okay, shall I start the class? Am I
Yes,
audible? Please respond.
ma'am, you're hearing? Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. So today's topic is acute rheumatic fever, and this is, I think, important not only for your theory part, even for your clinics. No, one of your main long case, short case, any case. So far, you have attended clinics, so you know that we most common case what we discuss is rheumatic related mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, aortic stenosis, regurgitation. So whatever I'm talking in this, I think all the slides will be very important for you, not only in theory aspect, also in clinics. So before going to acute rheumatic fever, can somebody tell me what it is?
Ma'am, it's caused by the Streptococcus pyogenes species.
Okay. Now, what is the pathology behind the presentation? No, the cardiovascular presentation. Why does it occur?
Molecular mimicry.
Because of the
Molecular
molecular
mimicry.
mimicry. So I think now moreover now it is like it is more of our autoimmune reaction. Yeah? all of us are exposed to Streptococcus, and it is the molecular memory or the autoimmune reaction which is going to cause a lot of damage to the heart. So that is why it's so important. So going to the 1 minute, please. Hold on. Slide move or So we are going to discuss the topics in the following order. One, the etiology, epidemiology, pathogenesis, clinical feature, diagnostic criteria, management, and summarizing the whole thing. So whenever this is a clue for you, whenever you get an essay question, so if you follow this pattern, you will never miss any of the points, and presentation also will be good when you're going to take up the theory exams. And if you just read up in this pattern also, it will be easy for you to also keep it in memory. So etiology, it is a group A beta hemolytic streptococci. Now, what is acute rheumatic fever? It is a systemic disease of childhood. It's an often recurrent illness. All of us have throat infection. So the commonest causes is the streptococcal infection. So it is this group A beta hemolytic streptococcal infection is the pathogenetic organism, and why are we so much worried? It is a delayed non-suppurative sequelae to the upper respiratory tract infection with this group A beta hemolytic streptococci or gas, whatever the organism. Now, what happens? This delayed sequelae, it's a diffuse inflammatory disease of connective tissues, primarily involving the heart, blood vessels, joints, and subcutaneous tissue. So coming to that, so see, all of us are exposed to this streptococcal infection. All of us at some point of the time or the other do get throat infection. So why is it that some people develop this cardiovascular complications and others? What do you think is the possibility behind it?
Lower immune system.
No. All children are quite fair enough. No, it is not in a HIV patient we are going to see. It is a normal. And what is the age group of presentation for acute rheumatic fever?
5 to 15 years.
Yes, 5 to 15 years. I think they are the normal children who are getting. All of us are being exposed. Yeah? So we are in a setup where all of us are going to be exposed. So what they say is there is a genetic background behind it. So it is what they say is if 100 people get it, is only the 10% of them who land up with this delayed non-suppurative sequelae. Now, see, now this is a disease exclusive. That is, this complication is exclusive of our developing country rather than developed country. So in like when you see some maybe 60-70 years back, it was equal. Whatever this cardiovascular complication part of it was equal. But once the standard of living improved, when the overcrowding, the most common cause for this increase, even for COVID, what we say, we have to maintain the social distancing and all that. Even for that, because it's an airborne infection. So when the standard of living improved, when the overcrowding was limited. Now in developed country, it's a very rare cause. Whereas in developing country, unfortunately for us, still this rheumatic fever and its complication is a very, a very important morbidity causing disease. Now compared, like when I was in your stage, that is when I was an MBBS student and when I used to go for clinics, it was so common, this acute rheumatic fever as well as the sequelae. But now it's very rare to see a child or adolescent presenting with acute rheumatic fever. Definitely compared to 25 years back to now, the disease has come down, but still we have a long way to go before we can at least bring down the incidence of this. All of us do have throat infection, but if the spread is limited, So the prone individuals will not develop cardiovascular complication. So the epidemiology, what we spoke, it is 5 to 15 years are the most susceptible thing. Now, it is not the one infection. So as somebody already told, it's a molecular mimicry, and molecular mimicry is going to cause pathological changes in the valve, and that pathological change, so recurrent infection, more recurrent damages, and finally by age of 30 years or so, they'll end up with all complications, all possible, like a heart failure and arrhythmias and all that problems occur. So it is not a single event, it is a multiple events. So what is the importance of this single and multiple event is we can prevent at each step before they finally land up with the full blown picture of your mitral stenosis with complication, or mitral regurgitation of aortic stenosis with aortic regurgitation, permutation combination with such a pathetic presentation where you cannot do anything. If we pick up at any stage, and it is one of rather a very treatable condition and very preventable condition. So that is why we give so much importance to this. Now it is rare before 3 years, and one thing what we have found is that it is 2 times more common in females rather than males. And I already told you, third world countries, because of the environmental factors, that is overcrowding, poor sanitation, poverty, and this fall, winter, early spring, all of us land up with some form of an infection, which can be viral and then going for secondary bacterial infection. Now, if less people are going to get infected, less spread, and less people are going to land up with complications. So in the developed countries, they have controlled this environmental factors, whereas in our country, in developing, it is still a long way to go. But because we know all this, I think we also should, as I said to you earlier, what we saw 25 years back when I was a student and what you are seeing now is going to be really, I think it's really better now. But still, we want to, literally free of such very, horrible disease. So the pathogenesis is, as you said, molecular mimicry. So which protein? It is the M protein. So the streptococcal group A carbohydrate epitope, N-acetyl glucosamine, and the helical coiled, that streptococcal M protein structurally mimic cardiac myosin in the human disease, that is rheumatic carditis. So once the throat pain occurs, that is when the infection sets in, what happens is the antibody, it's a normal response, normal immunity responses, the antibody formation occurs. Now in a group of people who are susceptible, now this antibodies is going to go and attack the cardiac, that is musculature, which can be a pericardium, myocardium, and endocardium. So it is a very classic feature. Acute rheumatic fever causes pancarditis. That is a very classic feature of your streptococcal induced this rheumatic fever. Now, these antibodies bind to molecules on cardiac cells similar to M protein, causing antibody-induced injury to heart valves and sarcolemma. Now, this is one mechanism. This is the main mechanism. But they have even they have postulated that streptococcal bacteria goes and sits in the cardiac musculature in a susceptible individual, and then it causes this HLA-prone, the type 2 HLA-prone individuals to cause antibody damage. That is a very rare possibility. This is what we expect you to answer. How does this rheumatic fever or this infection with streptococcal bacteria causes the cardiac involvement? Now, so now if the streptococcus, what are all the infections which can occur when a streptococcal bacteria is when an individual is infected with streptococcal bacteria? What are all the possibilities? One is pharyngitis. Apart from that, what are all the possibilities?
Post streptococcal glomerular.
I'm talking of now streptococcal. Where all can it affect? Apart from your
cellulitis, ma'am.
Very good, excellent. Then
Scarlet fever.
excellent. So scarlet fever, sepsis, all, it can be a pyogenic form where it can affect all the parts, any part. It can present as a full-blown sepsis. So anything can occur, but it is the pharyngitis. Then suppose if the streptococcal bacteria infects the skin, what do you call it?
Impetigo.
Impetigo, excellent. Now, suppose a patient develops impetigo, what organ can get involved? Now, for pharyngitis, we say heart. For skin, what do we call? Which organ can get involved?
Kidney, ma'am.
Kidney, yeah. So, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Now, what they say is this: the strain. There are few strains only which is going to cause this molecular mimicry of this M protein type, and they say pharyngitis. That is the throat infection. So, this causes only the cardiac involvement. Whereas the strains of the streptococcus which infect the skin, 99% can cause renal involvement, but there is one possibility that it may affect the heart. But generally speaking, when the pharyngitis occurs, possibility of cardiac is more. When skin infection, the possibility of renal is more. So how does it act? So once the bacterium comes to the pharyngeal epithelium, then here it is presented to the B and T cell. It's a natural process. But in this MHC class 2, that is your HLA, no? When genetically prone, they develop this cross-reactive antibody. Not all develop. All of us are exposed to streptococcal infection. We live in the same community as a patient who is coming from acute rheumatic fever. But if the genetically prone people are going to develop the complications of it. So once this cross-reactive antibody forms, because of this activated cross-reactive T cell, it is going to affect these main four organs. So heart, it is going to cause pancarditis. When it is brain, it is going to cause chorea. Then joint, it is going to cause arthritis, and skin is erythema marginatum and subcutaneous nodules. Now, what is that famous one-liner which we always say is, it licks the joint and bites the heart. So what do you mean? What do you mean by
non-erosive arthritis?
Yeah, so you don't get a post-arthritic complication when you're dealing with this rheumatic arthritis. In fact, if there is a post-arthritic some complication, it rules out, literally, it's going to rule out your this rheumatic fever as an etiology. But heart is going to cause a lot of issues involved. So this group A is going to express large amount of M protein. So large amount of IgG is produced, and this will bind to the cardiac cells, which has a very similar thing as M protein, and antibody-induced injury to heart valves and sarcolemma. What happens is this heart valves, there is a the inflammatory response because of it will activate the cascade of what do you call all the inflammatory, the cascade occurs, and finally injury happens. Now, when there is a recurrent infection, the injury is going to add on and on. After some years, maybe after some 5 years or so, even though the infection is not there, the pathology keeps on evolving. So what happens is, though, if you see a patient at the age of 30 years, patient will be having full-blown mitral stenosis. So if you ask a history, most of them may give or may not give. Few of them will give, at around the age of 15 years, I had a fever with joint pains and all that. The history typically they'll give. After that, typically they'll say, we went to a local doctor, we had a treatment, we are fine, or they evaluated, they told we have to continue medication. We did not continue medication, and they landed up now. In between this 15 years, did you have any fever, joint pain, all that? We didn't have any similar such complaint. So may have come and gone as mild fever, or beyond that, the pathological changes continue. So that is why we have to be very careful not to have this recurrent, attacks. So now coming to this group A beta hemolytic streptococci, the strains which produce the rheumatic fever. Now this is a very important your clinical question. Okay, all of you should be able to tell what are the types which is going to cause your rheumatic fever. That is 1, 3, 5, 6, 18 and 24. Remember, so these are the few strains which are going to produce the rheumatic fever and subsequent damage. Now what is that antibody of this outer protein cell wall? This capsule, and I think next is your cell wall. This is protein. So this induces antibody response in victim, which results in autoimmune damage to heart valves, your subcutaneous tissue, tendons, joints, and basal ganglia, which results in your chorea. Now, already as we spoke, no, this streptococcus is going to cause suppurative and non-suppurative. The suppurative is your pharyngitis, tonsillitis, cellulitis, myositis, osteomyelitis, septic arthritis, pneumonia. Now, even for pneumonia, streptococcus pyogenes most common. Then your puerperal sepsis, very important, bacteremia, that is sepsis. Then your necrotizing fasciitis and scarlet fever. This necrotizing fasciitis and scarlet fever are the only ones which is toxin mediated. Others are due to bacterial per se. The non-suppurative disease is causes your acute rheumatic fever, then your glomerulonephritis and rheumatic heart disease. Now, this group where we spoke about this suppurative disease may lead on to streptococcal toxic shock syndrome, which is another emergency which we see in our intensive medical care unit. So, as such, streptococci, we have to know, like it causes such variety of diseases. Now, as I already told you, this pharyngitis can lead to acute rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Skin infection leads to only glomerulonephritis. Okay, I think I told the other way around, but pharyngitis can land up with glomerulonephritis. It's a very minor percentage, but skin is always your renal involvement. So why is it so? Is because in skin infection will not result in rheumatic fever or carditis, as the skin lipid cholesterol inhibits the antigenicity. That is what it has been said. Now, when we talk about the clinical feature, when a patient comes with acute rheumatic fever, so first thing, patient will have fever, anorexia, lethargy. Any fever is going to present with this sort of formation. Now, joint pain. Now, what is the peculiarity of the joint involvement in a rheumatic fever? What group of joints get involved?
Large group.
So large joints, and it is a migratory polyarthritis. So typically they'll say first one knee, then another knee, then ankle, and then elbow. So that is how the pain will be. How will the pain be? What is the typical pain of the arthritis in a patient with rheumatic fever? So they say it is going to be a severe pain. Now, when we see, now what I'll tell how it was earlier, no? So earlier, maybe some 20-25 years back, when the NSAIDs, all the drugs availability, now over-the-counter drugs are so much, and most of the people are well aware. I think even if you go to a remote rural area also, they know they can go to the nearest primary health center or some center where they can be. I'm talking of South, where we have a good setup of medical care. Now, previously what happens, now they come to us when this, the arthritis, which is the jumping. So first knee joint, it will be a severe pain. So typical feature, what is the difference between arthritis and arthralgia?
Arthralgia is only pain, ma'am.
Yes.
Arthritis is with inflammation.
Yes, so all the points, so it will be warm, tenderness, everything will be there. So they can present, so most of them present with arthritis, it will be a severe pain. So how severe is the pain described of rheumatic fever is? It will be so severe that they will not even allow cloth to fall upon the knee. They say even that causes severe pain. But they respond very beautifully to which drug?
Aspirin, ma'am.
Aspirin. So that is why you give one dose of aspirin, you give correct dose, immediately the pain subsides. In fact, if it's such an arthritis, when NSAIDs does not clear the pain, you'll have to think of some alternative diagnosis when the patient presents only with fever with polyarthralgia. So that important point you should keep in mind. Now, nowadays what happens is most of the people, day one of fever, some joint pain, they start taking NSAIDs and paracetamol. So we don't get this sort of a very typical presentation of this migratory polyarthritis. Whatever we are going to talk, this is a typical presentation. But now with the era of your antibiotics and NSAIDs and all the drugs, we may not see such a typical manifestation. But how it comes is, they come to us still today we do get some cases, not so frequent, but we do get. They have fever, joint pain, that is in the form of knee pain. Then the knee pain is cleared. Then after some time, again they got ankle pain. Then they took some medication, cleared. So that is how they present. That is, and then so if a patient comes with this sort of a presentation, also we should, in the age group of adolescent, like 5 to 15 years up to 30 years. So we have to have this in back of our mind. because we are in a developing country where we are still seeing a lot of complications related to rheumatic fever. So now usually the latent period is 2 to 3 weeks after an episode of streptococcal pharyngitis. So we should always have that in our mind. Now, as we already told, it is a multi-system disorder, number one. It is an autoimmune pathology. It is how the body responds to your this antigen-antibody complex. Not everybody is going to present with the polyarthritis. Not everybody is going to present with carditis. Chorea is an independent manifestation. So normally, if a carditis has to occur, it can happen within 2 to 3 weeks. It can either be a frank presentation of congestive heart failure, or it can be a subclinical, in the sense that clinically there may not be any presentation, but echocardiogram can pick up the lesions. Or they may present suddenly in a matter of, they would have had mild fever. I mean, typical presentation may not be there. Or fever with joint pain, they would have taken some NSAID, it became all right. After 6 weeks, they can land up with chorea. So there is so much permutation combination available. So that is why when such a thing is there, always they form a criteria. So this is the Jones criteria, that is revised Duckett-Jones criteria. Now this is a must question every exam. All your your clinics, we are going to ask you this question: what is the Jones criteria? So you should know by heart, and without hesitancy you should answer. So that's so important. So what are the major criteria? That is, you remember easily with cases: carditis, polyarthritis, subcutaneous nodules, erythema marginatum, and Sydenham's chorea. Now we'll talk about each. So we'll finish this. Minor criteria is fever, arthralgia, elevated acute phase reactants like CRP and elevated ESR, and ECG manifestations of prolongation of PR, and of course leukocytosis. So if there is a 2 or more major manifestation, or 1 major with 2 minor, along with the evidence of preceding streptococcal infection in the form of, you can take a swab, throat swab, and demonstrate streptococcal infection, throat culture for showing the streptococcal infection, or if it is beyond 2 to 3 weeks, obviously the bacteria will not be there, the elevated ASO titer. Only in chorea and indolent carditis, that is, the carditis is on and off, it may keep on going on, but the bacteria would have resolved. Only in those conditions you may not get this throat culture or elevated ASO criteria. Now carditis, now it is going to be in the form of pancarditis. What do you mean by pancarditis?
All 3 layers, pericardial.
Yes, so you will have a pericardial, myocardial, and endocardial involvement. Now see, we are basically clinicians, so we have to clinically pick up if there is all the signs and symptoms of pancarditis. Now suppose if it is pericarditis, what is the main symptom they will have?
Pericardial rub, ma'am.
Rub is our auscultation.
Pain.
Pain. So chest pain, which will be, what is the nature of chest pain you get?
Pricking type, ma'am.
Yes, pricking type of chest pain, center or left side chest pain. And what is the relieving factor for the chest pain?
Leaning forwards.
So leaning forward. So if such a typical pain is present, we know that the pericardium is involved. So what are the evidences clinically for myocardial involvement? We can have tachycardia. Okay, and that ECG changes, that prolongation of PR interval we have put no. All these are the signs that myocardial involvement is there. For endocardial involvement?
Valvular abnormality.
Yeah, so clinically, how are we going to make out?
Murmurs, no?
What murmurs, ma'am?
Caricum.
Excellent. What is it? Diastolic or systolic murmur?
Diastolic.
So mid-diastolic murmur. It can be in varying murmurs you are going to get because of valvulitis. So now a person develops acute rheumatic fever, valvulitis is developed. So you may have varicose murmur, or you can have a systolic murmur, pansystolic murmur of acute mitral regurgitation. You can have any form of murmurs present. Now coming to arthritis. So it is a migratory polyarthritis involving the large joints. So this is your typical feature of polyarthritis in rheumatic fever, and it does not cause post-arthritic, no, there is no residual abnormality. Once you treat, it becomes absolutely normal. Then we'll come to subcutaneous nodules. Where will you look for subcutaneous nodules?
Elbows, occiput.
Yeah, so how do you, from occiput, then extensor aspect in the elbow, then in the arm, then in the tibial part. So all this, if there is subcutaneous nodules, it's almost always associated with cardiac involvement. It is now very less, no? What we used to see now, it's very less, like the incidence has come down so much, like only 2% of patients you may see subcutaneous nodules. Now, erythema marginatum. Can you describe a lesion of erythema marginatum?
Central clearing with serpiginous erythematous border, ma'am.
Yeah, so it is a macule. Basically, it is a macule which has a central clearing with the serpiginous borders, which is seen in the front and the back of the chest, can be in the limb and all, but mostly in the chest, and it is an evanescent rash. So, and usually it is only seen in a very fair-skinned individual. It is also 2 to 3%. Subcutaneous nodules, they say around 2 to 30% also you can see, but erythema marginatum, very few. 2 to 5%, and usually in a very fair-skinned individual only you can make out this erythema marginatum. Then about chorea. Now, chorea, see, all the above, whatever we spoke of, carditis, polyarthritis, subcutaneous nodules, erythema marginatum, all this, if it has to happen, occurs within 2 to 3 weeks. But chorea is one which occurs after 6 months, maybe the initial presentation of a rheumatic heart disease. Now, so usually the chorea, anybody define chorea?
Rapid, purposeless, irregular.
Yeah, it is a semi-purposive, rapid, purposeless, tremor. No, it is not purposeless, semi-purposive. Usually involves the head and upper limb. Sometimes the whole of one side can be involved when we call it as if only one side of the body is involved.
Hemichorea.
Hemichorea. And along with this chorea, no, usually they have emotional lability. Usually they will be there for up to 3 weeks to 4 weeks. But this emotional lability part will present up to 6 months also, you can have this chorea. Now coming to the minor criteria, all patients will have some amount of fever, and it is not that everybody land up with polyarthritis, even polyarthralgia. We have to give importance. What they say is now this revised Duckett-Jones criteria is for this developed country where it is very rare, and in a developing country it's a bit common. So they have the minor variation, but this is basically the criteria which you should know. Then of course elevated and acute phase reactant, ECG change, and these patients will have leukocytosis. So this you should always you should remember Jones criteria. So as I told you, this polyarthritis, carditis, erythema marginatum, all these occurs up to 2 to 4 weeks. It can occur. Chorea occurs after 6 months. Subcutaneous nodules can be at any point of time. It can be present. Now, carditis, as I said, it's pancarditis. Usually, incidence. Suppose if it is in a very young individual, they say the chances are very high, but it is only 30% when it is in adolescence. And once the carditis occurs, it does leave a sequelae. It can be mild in the form of just echo changes of thickening of valves, or it may cause permanent damage to the organ, that is the heart. So myocarditis. So we are talking of all that each organ involvement. So myocarditis, you can have features of congestive cardiac failure because myocardium is involved. No? So you can have breathlessness, third heart sound, fourth heart sound. What is summation gallop? When all are there.
S1, S2, and S3, S4 will be combined, ma'am. It will be heard
Combined,
as a
no? So
single.
that gallop is always called a summation gallop. And you can have this prolonged PR interval. You should basically, if you see, this is your P, and the first positive wave after the P is the R. So you just see the difference, no? Here the so prolonged, no? This is PR prolongation. And if you see the pathology, it is that Aschoff nodules, which is characteristic of acute rheumatic fever. There is multiple tiny granulomatous lesions in the heart. So what does it basically contain? It contains your eosinophilic collagen with activated macrophages known as caterpillar cells or anti-show cells. No, this you should remember: fibrinoid collagen, collagen fibers, plasma cell, no, Aschoff cells, all this, no, you should remember. Now, endocarditis, it is inflammation of endocardium and valves, causes fibrinoid necrosis within the valve leaflets. So what are the clinical features? You have a new murmurs or changing murmurs. So you can have a murmur of a mitral regurgitation, that is high-pitched, apical, pansystolic murmur of blowing quality, which radiates to the left axilla. Now, Caricom's murmur is a soft mid-diastolic. Mid-diastolic murmur, is it a high-pitched or a low-pitched murmur?
Low pitch.
Yes. So during valvulitis, due to nodules on mitral leaflet, it indicates severe mitral insufficiency if there is a Caricom's murmur. Then you can also have AR murmur, aortic regurgitant murmur, that is high-pitched blowing decrescendo, early diastolic murmur of aortic regurgitation, heard best after deep expiration or on leaning forward. So any murmur, no, we always, I think in your clinics they would have told you. So always you start with, whenever you are auscultating one area, you're going to start with sounds, that is first half sound, second half sound, then any added sound, and then we go to the murmur. So we first talk about the pitch of the murmur, whether it's a quality of the murmur, then what is the type of the murmur, whether it's a systolic or a diastolic murmur, then what is it a regurgitant or a stenotic lesion, and what is the correlation with your respiration in better heard on inspiration or expiration, and what is the position where it is best heard. So when you tell everything, no, it becomes a very clear cut what is happening, no. It is a very impressive way of telling, and second, we know that you know what is happening inside. So now when you see a normal valve, so it is a transparent, avascular, thin, flexible membrane. Here it is like a fish mouth, no, you can see. It is a thick, fibrous, scarred, stenotic. See the size so small, fixed. No, it will not be mobile and with some blood, some points and all are seen. So this much damage a rheumatic fever can cause to the valve when there is a recurrent infections. So that is your typical fish mouth, and they may have even vegetations, rheumatic vegetations on the mitral valve. So it starts with the vegetation, then the pathological process goes on. And then coming to the pericarditis. So as we already spoke, it will have a just pericardial pain. There will be a pericardial friction rub and a precordial tenderness. They may have a pericardial effusion. It's not so common, but can present. And usually they finally may also present as acute fibrinous pericarditis, the typical bread and butter type. So now this migrating polyarthritis, it's a most common manifestation. Carditis, pancarditis and all occurs 30 to 50%, but more than that is a migrating polyarthritis. It is an acute, painful, migratory and asymmetric arthritis. So you call it as fleeting and flitting arthritis. So it happens 2 days, it may be in the knee, third day it goes to the ankle, then suddenly it comes to the elbow, and maybe 2 weeks later again in the knee. So it is a fleeting and a flitting type of arthritis and always involves the large joint. This Jacquard's arthritis is a very rare deformity. Just for your knowledge, but most always, if anybody in clinics are going to question you, what is the type of joint you should always say large joints are affected. So this Jacquard's arthritis is a rare deformity in the metacarpophalangeal joints due to repeated attacks of rheumatic fever. But usually, any joint involved, it heals within 5 to 7 days without residual deformity. Now, when there is a polyarthritis, we have to differentiate. No, the one differential diagnosis comes as post-streptococcal reactive arthritis. But here, there is no further carditis and all that does not occur. So, how are we going to differentiate whether it's a rheumatic fever-induced arthritis or post-streptococcal? Usually, if it is a post-streptococcal arthritis, usually they resolve within 1 year or so. They become all right. Carditis doesn't occur, but you have a doubt. This patient, whether the carditis, whether it's acute rheumatic or it's a post-streptococcal, better to keep this carditis in your mind. We should not miss it. And here in acute rheumatic fever, it is migratory, transient, usually large joints. Whereas in this post-streptococcal reactive arthritis, it will be additive, persistent, usually can affect large, small, even axial joints. Even our backbone, all that can get affected. And in acute rheumatic fever, even a single dose of NSAID, if you give aspirin around 100 milligram per kg, day 1, they become all right. Whereas in this post-streptococcal, it's very difficult to treat. And usually it occurs to 2 to 3 weeks. Here within 10 days you may get. And this post-streptococcal has a bimodal presentation. One, it occurs in 8 to 14 years, and second presentation 21 to 37 years. Now, subcutaneous nodules, if subcutaneous nodules is present, we have to look out for carditis. So, it's often associated with carditis. So, what is it? There will be small, painless, mobile, hard nodules along the extensor surface of the joints and bony prominences, tendon, dorsum of the foot or the occiput. So, this is how you will describe a subcutaneous nodules. Usually appears after 4 weeks of onset, and it also leaves no residual damage. Can you tell me one DD for a subcutaneous nodule? Any other condition which can cause subcutaneous nodule?
Leprosy, ma'am. Sarcoidosis.
Sarcoidosis, okay. Okay.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
Rheumatoid arthritis, yeah. So you should have. Now this is your typical erythema marginatum. It's a pink or red macules with the central clearing with the serpiginous spreading edges, which is non-itchy and more in the trunks and limbs. Now one more thing I want to tell you is whenever you talk about skin lesions, you should know what is a macule, what is a papule, what is a vesicle, what is a bulla, what is what do you call purpura, all that. No, you should be very clear. You should know all the definitions before coming for clinics. So this is how you are going to describe. It is only in very fair skin individual. So in Indian skin, even in brown skin, it is very difficult to find out. Now, this either rheumatic chorea is otherwise called Sydenham's chorea or Scent-Vitus dance. It occurs only in 5 to 10% of case, but if a chorea case is there, it may be kept as a short case for you. So it is a late neurological manifestation that occurs 3 to 8 months after triggering infection. So the first sign is your emotional lability rather, and they'll have difficulty in walking and writing. So it is a spasmodic, brief, semi-purposeless sort of involuntary jerky movement. Usually, if you see the child, usually in adolescent, you see they'll try to hide. It's a semi-purpose. They'll try to when they're aware that you're looking, they'll try to suppress it and all that. You can typically make it out. So these are few signs which you should know. This milkmaid grip, that is squeezing and relaxation movement when asked to squeeze the examiner's finger. Why is it happening? What is the function of your basal ganglia?
They control movement and
Yeah,
dampen movements.
yes. So this control is big. That is why you have this alternative contraction and relaxation. Then because of this asynchronous contraction, that lingual muscles and all, you can see the back of one, it is just like moving. Then this is very typical, is a jack in the box sign. That is the tongue, when protruded out, will automatically involuntary move in. Then this pronator sign, that is you ask the patient to hold the hand up, hold the upper limb up. So what happens is usually there is hyperextension of finger with the dorsiflexion at the wrist, and typical that Saint Vitus dance, the typical that picture they give, no, that will happen. That is otherwise called as pronator sign. So we have gone through all the clinical features. So how are we going to manage? So at each level we can manage. So first is primordial prevention. So you have to social improvement, like improving housing, the hygiene. Now I think with this COVID and all, I think that social distancing, all that is going to be very helpful even in preventing we don't want that infection to occur at all. Once now there is a group, this streptococcal infection occurs. Now, so primary prevention. So immediately you treat the streptococcal sore throat and follow it up 2 to 3 weeks. Suppose they land up with acute rheumatic fever, that is fever, then with joint pains, which is we spoke, no, all these criteria are there. Now, early detection. So how can we detect early? What can be done? What are the tests which can be done?
Anti-streptolizin.
Yeah, so we are going to see the ASO titer. We are going to categorize according to the Jones criteria and diagnose as acute rheumatic fever. And we are going to do an echocardiography and follow-up echocardiography. What they say is this auscultating. Auscultating, if the patient has a full-blown carditis, it can be picked up by auscultation. But there are so many patients who will have subclinical, that is indolent, inside image change, which will not be very obvious in auscultation. So nowadays they advise that when you're going for screening echocardiography has a better role, because it picks up even the mild changes of this thickening of the valve. So what is the importance is that is the pathology has started. So we can aggressively go for secondary prevention, in the sense that ask them to continue the drugs, to not discontinue because of the disastrous consequences. So the follow-up becomes very important. Now once the rheumatic heart disease is occurred, now the patient comes with full-blown mitral stenosis or mitral regurg or whatever it is. Now that is a point where advanced medical management and surgery, in the sense that a patient comes with mitral stenosis is mild to moderate. We don't want it to become severe mitral stenosis. So we manage, we give appropriate drugs so that they don't land up with heart failure. Now recurrent heart failure is going to affect their quality of life. They'll not be able to do their normal employment. We don't want that to happen. So even so at all the stages, it should be an aggressive approach. And we don't want them to land up with endocarditis where the mortality is high, morbidity is high. So all this we should keep in our mind when we are going to go for the management. So what is the primary prevention you can do? So you can give, this is less than 27 kg, give 6 lakhs of benzathine penicillin G, or more than 27 kg, we are going to give 1.2 million dose for this IM once in 3 or 4 weeks. Now, so previously it was given in injectable form, but what is the complication of giving injection penicillin?
Infective endocarditis.
No. Means it's a
Pain.
pain, and they can go for anaphylaxis also. No? Pain shock, anaphylaxis. It's one of the major complication now. When we are doing it in a government setup where many patients can come. So the risk of anaphylaxis is always there, and sudden death. And what they say is anaphylaxis can occur at any dose. Maybe for 5 years he would have been free of anaphylaxis. One particular day he may land up with anaphylaxis. So we should be very careful. And so in a government setup, they always give an oral drug. So children, they give 250 milligram BD, adult and adolescent 500 milligram BD or TDS. Or once you admit the patient, you can give propane penicillin. And if the patient is allergic to penicillin, you can go for erythromycin. Arthritis, you have to give aspirin 75 to 100 milligram per kg in 4 divided doses for 6 weeks till ESR has fallen. So this much, this long you have to give treatment. And usually the relief is dramatic and response is within 24 hours. Now suppose you give this 100 milligram per kg dose. Now that occurs up to 3 to 6 grams of aspirin you are going to give. Now one tablet what we are available is around 300 to 330 milligram. So you are going to give 2 tablets or 3 tablets 3 times or 4 times a day. Now what is the complication of aspirin?
Bleeding, ma'am.
Okay, one bleeding. So salicylate toxicity.
Gastritis.
Gastritis, very important. Then
Rey syndrome.
race, very good. Then what else?
Hepatotoxic.
Hepatotoxic, excellent. Then what?
Aspirin-induced asthma.
Enema?
High anion gap acidosis, ma'am.
Okay, very good. So of course may occur. Okay, then that is only in poisoning you get that. Then here what can happen? Here any change? Salicylate toxicity?
Sensory neural deafness.
No, that is no. Not deafness. It causes tinnitus. In fact, one of the earliest signs of this, the patient developing toxicity is tinnitus. So when we are giving 100 milligram per kg body weight, no, it's quite a high dose. So we have to be alert of all this, what toxicity which can develop. Because once only when we know the such toxicity occur, we can treat accordingly. And especially this tinnitus and all in the early signs that the patient is going for toxicity. Now, aspirin is a NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agent. So this is for carditis. The aspirin is enough, but it's a controversial rather this present treatment with corticosteroids. So prednisolone 1 to 2 milligram per kg per day, which is given for 4 to 6 weeks. Then it's tapered and stopped. But it is not a it's a protocolized management. It is an individual patient to patient basis physician's management, because it has a very controversial role for steroids, because this dose of aspirin of 100 milligram per kg itself is enough to bring down the carditis. But if the patient has in the first attack of rheumatic fever itself, the patient develops heart or anything. So first thing we always advise is bed rest. And once the patient starts improving, you can slight mobilization can be advised. If the patient has cardiac failure, give diuretics and digoxin. Chorea, you can give diazepam or haloperidol, and joints, of course, depends on arthritis, usually responds very well to medications. The secondary prevention, preventing the subsequent attacks. So we give every 4 weeks of 1.5 twice daily oral penicillin. That is what is given in our government institutions. If a patient is allergic, you can go for you can also give sulfadiazine, that is 500 milligram once daily, or 1 gram. Now the patient is allergic to penicillin or sulfadiazine, where there's no other go, erythromycin has to be given. So in our country now, if there is evidence of carditis, usually give lifelong. But it is for 5 years after the last attack or 21 years of age, whichever is longer. Oh, this holds good for in abroad, where developed countries, where you know that after 21 years you are not so much exposed, but in prophylaxis. But with carditis with no residual valvular, they say for 10 years clinically, or echocardiography, they say up to 40 years of age, sometimes lifelong prophylaxis. For all practical purpose in India, it is only lifelong prophylaxis. Maybe if there is no carditis, we can plan for 10 years also. Okay. So it is usually individual circumstance. Based on individual person, what background they are coming, based on that only we plan for this duration of prophylaxis. So now coming to the summary of what we spoke. So it is caused by a beta hemolytic, group A beta hemolytic streptococci, and the damages is because of this molecular mimicry. And the major criteria is carditis, which is a pancarditis. Polyarthritis, it's a fleeting and flitting type of involving the large joints with a very dramatic response to aspirin. And subcutaneous nodules, it's a painless nodules on extensor surface that resolves completely. Erythema marginatum, that is a red or pink macule, central with centrally clearing with serpiginous edges, and Sydenham's chorea, which is a late but a specific manifestation. So you should remember all this. And the minor criteria being fever, arthralgia, elevated CRP, elevated ESR, long PR interval, and leukocytosis. And treatment, basically it is arthritis. For arthritis, it is aspirin. Carditis and severe arthritis, the steroids. But even for carditis, mild to moderate carditis, aspirin is enough. Penicillin prophylaxis, it is definitely a lifelong penicillin prophylaxis, and strict bed rest when the patient is having acute rheumatic fever. Now, when a patient develops rheumatic fever, what is which valve gets most commonly involved?
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve. What is the next common valvular involvement?
Aortic.
Aortic.
Valve.
So aortic valve. So it can be 100% any patient with rheumatic fever, mitral valvular involvement. Second is can be aortic. That is, it can be either it is never an isolated aortic valve. It is a mitral with an aortic valvular involvement. Usually pulmonary and tricuspid valve is usually because of complications like pulmonary hypertension or congestive cardiac failure with the tricuspid regurgitation, which is due to the dilatation, that is cardiac enlargement. So the basically two valves which is involved is your mitral and aortic. The tricuspid and the pulmonary, definitely no of rheumatic fever primary involvement. Usually it is a secondary involvement. Then second is a person gets rheumatic fever at the age of 15 years and the patient is lost to follow up. What is the first lesion? That is valvular lesion you are going to see. Of course, mitral valve. What is it? Is it a stenosis or a regurgitation?
Prolapse, mitral valve.
No, mitral valve prolapse is it can be a congenital or it can be acquired. Okay, so mitral valvular involvement is there. Is it in the form of stenosis or
Regurgitation.
Yes, excellent. So the first presentation, that is suppose they had a recurrent rheumatic fever, a severe rheumatic fever, and they don't follow this prophylaxis, they may land up with mitral regurgitation. But as I said, no, after a few years, that is up to 30 years, you can get recurrent attacks. Beyond that, even though the same person in 35 years or so, what is the next lesion you can see? That is when the stenosis happens. The first valvular lesion you should always remember is, of course, mitral regurgitation. The second, that is after few years only, mitral stenosis occur. But unfortunately, in India, we see mitral stenosis in very young age group. What do you call that? Juvenile mitral stenosis. So, so it is not that this rheumatic fever, once it gets over, we have to really be very, should be very, what do you call this? You should follow this, as I told you, this very important. So, there are so many opportunities where we can prevent before this final damage, which can occur in the form of this heart failure, endocarditis, all the complications like stroke, all that. No, we don't want that to happen. So there are so many places where the preventive measures can be done. So I think this in nutshell covers everything about acute rheumatic. Notes, please ask. So
Ma'am,
I
is
think
there,
each slide is very important. Just, yes, ma'am, tell me.
is there any reason why they give procaine penicillin for inpatients, ma'am, instead of benzathine?
No, you can give any. We even give a daily IV, any form of penicillin. So oral form is less effective than IV. That's all. Your IV water. I'll just share. So yeah, you should know everything because it's not only important for your theory, even for your clinics, it's very important. Okay. Anything else?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
So I think, yeah, please. So I think we'll meet again next Tuesday. I think the next class will be on mitral valve. So, so I think this class is very important for you, not only in theory, but also in sheet to the department registrar. Okay. Thank you all. Meet you on Tuesday. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.